I don't know what we would do without Sarah. This town certainly wouldn't be the same without her, and that's why we all love her.
Sarah's one of the most important figures because she offers this launching pad for young and emerging composers. And she doesn't just commission young composers or emerging composers, but that does seem to be a focus of hers and something that excites her most.
So for me, the composer, it was an opportunity to get a piece performed that would normally be really difficult, if not impossible to do.
She was the first person to offer me a commission.
Left-hand pits, yeah.
Yep.
Hang on. Pits, arco, and... You know what? I reckon we can turn that down too.
That's a better sound, yeah.
Sarah Curro, welcome to State of the Arts.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you here.
Thanks.
So firstly, we had 53 supporters donating a total of $3,359 to make this film possible. What do you think that says about the State of the Arts?
Oh, wow. I know what it says about my friends. It's amazing. You never know how a possible campaign's going to go, and this was just beautiful, but it's actually them supporting you and what you're trying to do as well. Highlight the people that might get left behind.
Mm. We're seeing a bit of a trend like with campaigns like Possible, where artists are... Do you think they're being liberated by the fact that they're not having to apply to a government to get funding?
Yeah, that's right. Well, when I first started commissioning, which was probably 20 years ago now, there was no such thing as crowdfunding platforms as far as I know. And I paid for the commissions out of my own pocket. And also, as far as I know, I don't know anyone else who was doing that or who's done that so consistently. But now there are these campaigns, so people don't have to rely on the Arts Council or the ex-Arts Council or government or big institutions. They can get their self-confidence up and ask all of their network for a little bit of money. And that does give us a lot more freedom to move, yeah.
Do you think it's something that's sustainable for an artist to do continuously over their career, though? Like, do you think you could do it for the next 25 years?
Personally, what makes it easy for me to do what I do, the commissioning and putting on concerts, is that I have a good job. And I understand that not a lot of people trying to put on concerts have that income. So I work in the MSO, as you know. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would be able to commission so many composers. So I understand how difficult that is for a lot of people, but the freedom that I have because of my job can't be underestimated. So if you're an artist who wants to express something, you must find yourself a job to pay for that, because not everyone is going to support you straight away. You have to show that what you're doing is worth doing. You have to make your own albums. There's so much going on now in Melbourne. Speaking of the state of the arts, in Melbourne alone, there are more acts than audience. And that's not to say the acts aren't worth going to see, but if someone asks me to go to their show, I look in my diary and I've been asked to go to 3 other things as well.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's not this huge desire for music and interesting modern art to be viewed. It's that there's so much on, which says a lot about Melbourne and how many creative people there are here, which is fantastic.
Definitely. So over the last 8 years, you have personally commissioned 29 works. Is that right?
Well, 29, I've performed 29 premieres, but I think I've commissioned about 8 more since then. So,
it's an amazing contribution. I mean, a lot of artists have come to me, composers have come to me while we've been preparing for this, and they've told me that they wouldn't have written a work had it not been for you commissioning them.
Well, I don't know. Every time I meet someone who says they can do something, make clothes, make music, make anything, I want to put my hand in my pocket and give them my money and say, make me something. Because otherwise they have to toil away with no audience, nothing, just for their own personal expression. If I feel someone's got something to say, I will grab that, pay for it, and work it into my show. Because I feel it's so important to give people a proper, real-life platform so they can learn how their craft or their art is actually going.
Yeah.
So they can have a real life experience of how what they're trying to say is going to work with a real audience. And that teaches them more than sitting in a room by themselves writing or sewing or, yeah.
Definitely, it's very altruistic of you, and I think
is.
you're leaving you're going to leave this world with a artistic legacy that is something that's to be immensely proud of. I think.
Thank you.
And you've changed the cultural landscape, with this attitude. You seem to have a fairly agnostic attitude towards the kinds of works that you compose. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, agnostic.
that? Yeah, because I mean, a lot of artists, when they hear of new music, they want to hear it first, and they want to put their own value judgment. They want to say, oh, well, I think that's good, bad, and if I think that works fantastic, I'm going to play it.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a natural kind of reaction, because as interpreters, we need to be able to respond to the music that we're delivering. But you've got this terrific and refreshing attitude, which is basically saying, well, you say to people, I don't care what you write,
I don't care what
something.
you write something.
Yeah.
I mean, I care what instruments they write for, but we can talk about that later. I say to them, I need 5 to 7 minutes on acoustic, electric or semi-acoustic violin. You can choose. They come over and they have a listen to all of them. And I don't care what style it's in, because the way the show works is that I am presented with 8 different composers' works for all these different violins. And from that music, I weave together what would be kind of like a great old-fashioned variety show.
Yeah.
And in between the pieces, I put things like film clips of rock bands who are associated with me. One of my composers might be in a band, so we'll play one of their film clips. Animations, slide projections of amazing photography. Whatever I come across, I weave it into the show, in case the audience doesn't like that piece, or the 4th piece, or the 7th piece. It doesn't matter, they're entertained. So I'm disguising unbelievably sometimes difficult and complex music, and sometimes simple, beautiful music, disguising all sorts of kinds of music within a framework of, this is fun, there's nothing to be afraid of, just enjoy these new sounds, but in between I'll give you something familiar.
It must be such a relief, for a composer, because I imagine, even as a performer sometimes, if you apply for a grant or something, there are so many hoops that you have to jump through.
Yep.
You have to conform to somebody else's idea of what it is that they want created, rather than what you yourself have to create. But so for them, it must be such a breath of fresh air to go, she'll play it.
Yes, yeah, I'll play it no matter what. I really will play it.
Yeah. We're seeing that, the rewards of that all around us. We're seeing these very relieved and excited composers getting to work.
Yeah.
And as I said before, perhaps writing things that otherwise wouldn't have been written. So it's great.
Sarah and I started our professional relationship relatively early on in the volume series Life, the life of that series. And Sarah was important because she was providing an opportunity to do things, to be modern, to have someone that you could rely on to perform your new music well, where those opportunities didn't really seem to exist elsewhere. So within the local community, you don't have, as a composer, a lot of opportunities to help create or be a part of creating a local canon of works. But someone like Sarah, and particularly Sarah because of her commitment to local composition and performance of those works, has meant that there's a real potential within her commissions to create a kind of Melbourne canon, to create a legacy of composing and performing new music. For me, I'm really appreciative of Sarah's efforts. It's like having family, as an artist, not to get too melodramatic, but you're kind of out there on your own in the cold a bit. You spend a fair bit of time by yourself writing the damn things, and then you spend a fair bit of time having them rejected. But with Sarah, you've got someone that you can write for, that you can work with, you can have the works become a real musical performance. It's like going home.
I want to talk about, okay, so it's great. You're doing, it's very clear and obvious that you've had a significant impact on the cultural scene here in Melbourne. But I want to talk about the impact it has financially on you, and just talk about how does the money work?
My tax man would say that it just doesn't work. But one of my deepest philosophies is that the not having money shouldn't be the reason you don't do something. So I just find the money, or I pay for everything. I pay for the venue hire, I pay for the commissions, I pay for marketing, publicity. So that ends up being very expensive. Then you have ticket sales, and you can pretty much break even when you don't take the commissions into account. So I always run the show at a loss, which means it reduces my overall taxable income.
So you deliberately don't break even?
Oh, well, I can't. It's impossible. I just can't, because I used to play in the Deakin Edge, which is quite expensive.
Yeah.
So I would be lucky to break even in terms of venue hire. That's it. And then there's all the marketing and the commissioning. So I've scaled down a little bit because it is becoming a bit unsustainable, but I want to keep doing it. I don't want to scale down the amount of composers I have, for example. I want, 6 to 9 composers every year. So to me, and again, I'm in the privileged position of having a good job. That's where the money comes from for it. If I wanted to make money out of the show, I would probably do what singer-songwriters do. I'd pick my favourites and I'd try and go on tour, and I'd sell CDs of that particular album. Say it would have 8 or 9 composers on it. But that defeats the whole purpose of the project, which is to commission as many composers as possible and present their work in a real-life setting.
So what I'm getting from you is there is no financial reward for you.
Oh, no.
At all.
No.
Right? So
No.
the rewards are entirely personal and they're artistic.
The rewards depends what mood I'm in, whether it's ego. I want to be seen to be this unbelievably altruistic person. Sometimes I do feel like that. But that's quite negative in the long term, because then you start comparing yourself with other people and what other people are getting. So then you have to just put your head back down and go back to the root of why you're doing it in the first place. And I'm in the position to help other people. So that I have to remind myself sometimes that this show, even though it seems about me, look at my costume, look at all my composers, it's very aristocratic, oh, write me a piece. But actually it's about them and them having a platform to say what they need to say. So sometimes the ugly ego, but the ego is also the thing that makes you have the self-confidence to do something outrageous like this with a lot of criticism. Why are you doing it? It costs you too much money. That doesn't matter. It has to be done because it's not really being done.
Is it ego or is it self-esteem?
Yeah, well, they're all tied in together. And and self-image as well. And it's a really important question for people to keep asking themselves, why are you doing this? Is it good for you? Not does it cost too much money, but does it make you feel like you can continue to do this for other people? Are you losing something or are you gaining something? And I still, next year's the 10th year, I still feel like I'm gaining something from it in the best possible way.
Sarah's strength is you can go back and forth with her and she pulls no punches. She's ruthless with an edit. She'll tell you this doesn't work and this can be better, and you don't get that from someone who's commissioning you, and it's incredible if you're built for it. When I wrote for Sarah, I started the piece that I started writing it in 2 separate airports. Gave it the pretentious title, JFK, LAX. And it was the first time I'd written solo violin. And it had also been the first time I was specifically approached for a commission. The amazing thing about working with Sarah for this particular piece, JFK, was whenever you write for anyone and whenever you write a piece, you have an idea. You think of a piece in its absolute perfect state when you're writing it, and it exists in your head, and then you get it out on the page and you try to add as much detail as you can. And I was very happy with how this piece made it onto the score. It sat right, and on every draft I looked at it, I couldn't think of any way to improve it. And Sarah, on her initial read-through, added more instantly, and everything she added we put back into the score. So anytime she marked up the score, we updated it with her markings. But it never stopped. It seemed with every subsequent performance there was more in it till it got to the point where she was able to put more into this piece than I could have hoped for or did hope for. There was more detail, there was more emotion, and extra things that you like to think you could get everything out get it onto paper, but there was more that she added that we couldn't get onto the page. You could never get onto the page. And it's just astounding every time I hear the piece. More and more to it.
You've talked about how you've made similarities between what you're doing and people that volunteer for other kinds of things, right? Because that's essentially what you are at the end. Like, although a lot of money changes hands, it just doesn't end up in your hands.
No, it doesn't end up in my hands.
Right.
But I love money like that. Money is to be used. I don't feel the sense that my money has to be hoarded and put into, say, a mortgage to help the banks get richer. I would much rather make my money be this living, breathing thing that helps to I don't know, inspire something to happen over there and to set an example for those people. It costs $400. It doesn't matter. Just pay for it. It's going to be worth so much more than just that piece.
I'm interested about the tax side of things. Like, are there any tax incentives for what you're doing? What's your relationship like with your accountant?
Yeah, he thinks I'm crazy. But I think after all this time, he gets the philosophical side of it now. So he just helps me get as many deductions as I possibly can in other areas. So I still get a good tax return.
I guess he's dealing with people on a daily basis whose objective, their primary objective is to gain more wealth.
Yep.
And so if he doesn't see the non-monetary value in what you're gaining.
Yeah, well,
right?
he's an accountant.
Yeah.
It's fine, that's his deal, that's good.
Yeah. Very good. So what do you think your attitude's done for the state of the arts?
Again, it depends on my mood. I'd like to think that I was the first person consistently commissioning people, and I do get the feeling now that there are more and more people doing that or feeling free enough to do it, because I like to think that I set a little bit of an example in that don't think it's too hard. Don't be afraid to ask composers for their work. Just every time you meet one, you can ask them if you like their music, you've heard their music. Just ask them for a piece. They'll be so honoured and flattered that you've done that. So I think I've shown that the gap between the commissioning performers and composers is much closer than they think.
But sometimes you're going to end up in a world of pain. Like if you just say, write me a work. I mean, they could write anything. It could be a real knuckle buster, and you might have to practice it an enormous amount of time.
One piece comes to mind. It was a 3-movement piece based on some Shakespearean verse from Much Ado About Nothing. The first movement was beautiful. It was so easy. It was and all the way through 1 minute of that. Second movement, just as easy. It's lovely little double stops. And he said, don't worry, the third movement's coming. You'll have it by about 2 weeks before the concert. I'm like, yeah, sure, thinking the third movement's going to be the easiest one of all. It ended up being 4 pages of continuous fast notes, time signature changing, unbelievably complex patterns, and it had to go and I was like, no. And because it was 2 weeks before the show, I had everything else to think about leading up to the show. I had to practice this piece in every bit of spare time.
Right. And you're a mum.
And I'm a mummy.
Sarah has played a hugely important role in my career as a composer. She was the first person to offer me a commission and really got the ball rolling for my career. And I understand that she's been that figure for lots of young and emerging composers. And I think that in Melbourne's fantastic music scene, and Melbourne's art music scene, Sarah's one of the most important figures because she offers this launching pad for young and emerging composers. And she doesn't just commission young composers or emerging composers, but that does seem to be a focus of hers and something that excites her most, is helping young composers on their way. And that was the role that she played for me. I'd never had anyone come up and say, I'll give you money and you write me a piece before. It was an extremely exciting moment. I was still at uni. And we worked together and the piece went really well and it really helped me on my way. The piece then got picked up by other composers and it's led to various other commissions. And I don't think any of that would have happened if Sarah hadn't bowled up to me after a MSO rehearsal and said, I like that piece that we just workshopped and do you want to write one for me specifically? So look, I have very fond memories of our first meeting. That was the first time I'd ever met her. I knew of her because I knew some people who'd worked with her. But to have her ask me to write her a piece was very, very exciting. And we've since worked together a number of times and it's always been an absolute pleasure. She has the ability to do something which is very hard to do, which she manages to check her ego at the door, and her main motivation and agenda seems to be, how do we make good music happen? How do we make interesting and good music happen? And that's all she's interested in. And if it's someone else's idea, great. And if it's her idea, great. And she's not really interested in any of those things. It's just how do we get to the end point and how do we make this music as good as it can be? And she's extraordinarily giving of her time. I called her a couple of weeks ago for some help on a project that she's not involved in. I'm writing for a string quartet. And I said, Sarah, I need some help with this violin part. And I'll give you some money. She said, no, you won't be paying me. And she helped me out with these violin parts. And again, it's just what excited her was, okay, you're writing this interesting piece. How can I help make it as good as it can be?
Let's say you're talking to the Prime Minister right now about your situation. All right. We can all see in the artistic community that you bring immense value to the people of Melbourne and arguably Australia too. What can the Prime Minister do to help you and help Australia as you have?
I think the Prime Minister has a few more bigger issues than me to handle, and I'm happy for him to handle that, because what I'd like to see is more independence in the low end. I consider myself in the low end, grassroots. I think people need to stop relying on the very top and change things from the bottom. For example, if we think organic food is better for everything, we all have to start buying organic food,
right?
Especially the people who can afford it.
Yes.
Because it's not for everybody money-wise, it's very expensive. If more and more and more people create a market for something, then it will change from the bottom. Organics will become cheaper, more people will be able to afford it. So I think personally, we have a responsibility, being privileged, to try and affect change from the bottom. And I can see that's already happening.
Okay, so I want to go back to this point that you were talking about grassroots.
Yep.
Your position on this matter is that?
Well, I believe, as we were talking about earlier, I believe that change can only come from the bottom, the majority, from grassroots level. So for me to do what I'm doing, it might not have the coverage of, say, the government and the reach that the government policies have, but it has that way of influencing other people around me to also be independent, be like courageous enough to do their own thing and spend their own money. That's sort of what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. But my concern about this is that I feel that the government does have a role in the arts. I feel that they need to support the arts. The government supports the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra.
Yep.
Right? And if it wasn't for that governmental support, that
Yep.
orchestra would collapse.
That's true, and I wouldn't then be able to do what I do.
Yeah.
But MSO also has to fight really hard for that government support. We are all in the same position when we ask for government help. Yes, you're right, the government has a responsibility to support every kind of thing that's going on, especially at a high level. So we all have to fight. We have to sit there with our hands out and ask the government for money. Yes, they have a responsibility to help us, but it's actually tied up with all sorts of horribly political things, as we also were talking about before. You're going to have to conform to their brief with what they want you to do. And so the best thing about not getting the government involved, or the big bodies that have money, best thing about leaving them alone is that you've got the freedom to do what you want. But on the other hand, if the top supports us, then we have the self-esteem to continue doing what we're doing, because it is very difficult for musicians, especially classical musicians, who don't feel like the whole of the majority of people support anything to do with what they do. So it's a constant fight in our minds. Is what we're doing worth doing? Is it worth me playing Beethoven 5? Is that worth something? So when you're not supported at the very top, it is difficult to feel like what you're doing is worth anything.
Fair enough. I'm just thinking about it from not just the perspective of does government have a role in funding the arts? Because I mean, clearly they do. To what extent? Well, I would say I think that they have a greater responsibility than they're showing that they have at the moment. But it's not just about the amount of money that they're giving arts and artists. It's also the extent to which their own mind has been absorbed by art. Like, how much do they know about art? And is their judgment being informed?
Right,
by
definitely.
art?
So like El Sistema in South America, the person who started that 25 years ago was heavily immersed in classical music. He absolutely loved it. He set this thing up and hey presto, you've got, less youth trouble because of El Sistema. It's this amazing thing.
Okay.
So you're talking about the individuals in government and whether they're already invested into the arts. Like Paul Keating was really into symphony orchestras and symphonic music, so he gave the Sydney Symphony Orchestra heaps of money and the AYO heaps of money. So you're talking about the individuals up there. If they love us, they'll give us money. So
Okay, you have commissioned 29 works. There's a lot of works, right? That's a significant cultural input, right? But what I'm trying to say is, if you didn't have to work in the MSO, right?
to do that,
Imagine how many works you would be able to commission, right?
Yeah.
And then your impact would be tenfold, maybe what it is now, because the vast majority of your year you're
Yes.
working for a living. Is that
Yeah.
a fair thing to say?
It is a fair thing to say, but when we're thinking about this stuff, we've got to think about whether it's goal-oriented or process-oriented. And what I do is process-oriented. So it's giving emerging composers an opportunity to train, basically. I'm like a training ground for them. My motivation is not to get the absolute best music as I see it and show it in the way that I want to show it. My motivation is the process. So does that need to be supported? I think it probably does need to be supported. But because it's so dependent upon the moment, what music I get, what complementary things I'm going to throw into the show, it's not easily sellable to government.
No.
So it's not nicely packaged in an easily understandable thing. I've gone for a Churchill Fellowship. I've gone for lots of grants, not lots, but a few little tiny weeny grants. And because there's no selling point, there's no famous person, there's nothing like that, then it's very difficult to communicate what it is. So when you can't communicate what it is because there's so many aspects to it, people aren't really that interested because they want to understand it straight away. It's very difficult to understand straight away. So I'm really going grassroots, as you say.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to do as many things as I possibly can, and a really fun show comes out of it. That's the best part of it. And then everyone just has a great time and feels a little bit more like a composer because of it.
I submit that if the government was filled with individuals that were highly cultured and knowledgeable about the arts, then perhaps artists, such as yourself and other significant contributors to the arts, wouldn't have to do a big hard sell, because as it has struck me straight away, I can see without any documentation or glossy brochure, which says Sarah Curro has made a great contribution.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know you have, because I can listen.
Yeah.
I have ears. You know what I mean? So.
But also, you're talking about the difference between, and this comes up a lot, the difference between whether it's art or whether it's entertainment, I think, or whether it's education. So there's three things which are easily supportable in separate states by government. And what I'm trying to do is fuse it all together. But the problem is, if what I do doesn't generate money by itself, then it's looked at as a risk. So people, in Australia especially, government, big business, doesn't want to support something that's risky. So that's another factor that comes into whether big organisations will support small things. It looks too risky, it's not meaningful enough as far as they can understand. So I actually like the freedom that I have, and I'm okay with the coverage. It's slow, slow going, old school, slow food, slow music, slow art. I think that's the best way to go.
It's nice, and it's constructive, I think, your attitude.
Maven is someone who kind of will bring you and me together, and someone from a completely different scene together. It's like someone who facilitates meetings.
Great.
It's a great word. Sarah Curro is a life force. She's a maven. She brings other life forces together so that they interact in such an interesting way. She is also a point of dispersion for many of the great musical activities which happen in this town. She makes things happen. She makes good things happen. She makes exciting things happen. And all with that childlike enthusiasm of hers and that perseverance that is unrelenting. I don't know what we would do without Sarah. This town certainly wouldn't be the same without her, and that's why we all love her.
So what do you got planned for the next year?
All right. Well, this year there's finally there's some girls. I mean, Jane Hammond, the piece I'm playing for this documentary, is a female composer. I'm only bringing this up because it seems to be very male dominated. But really, every time I see or meet a composer, I ask them to write a piece for me. It doesn't matter if they're a girl or a boy. But it just so happens that this year I've got 2 girls, which is unusual. Claire Johnston and Samantha Wolfe, which is exciting. And so that's going to be a lot of electronics, I think. I'm not sure what they have planned. I don't care. They can write me whatever. But next year is the 10th anniversary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a normal volume style show, but I'm also going to do another show that's teaming up with a Melbourne DJ. And I won't say who it is yet because it's going to be a surprise. Because I really believe that that's the only way we can really push it into 21st century aesthetic. Total electronics, still with the human element, with these instruments, these semi-acoustic or electric instruments, and it's totally collaborative. I have no idea how it's going to go. Haven't even started meetings with this guy, but we're both really excited. So for the 10th anniversary, it's going to just break away from classical music altogether, which is very exciting for me.
That's great. I do want to touch on this gender issue.
Yeah.
So it seems to me the message I'm getting from you is the state of the arts is that it's male dominated, like immensely so.
Yeah, for hundreds of years, actually. Yeah.
And you're saying that this is the case particularly with composers? Because there are a lot of women orchestras.
Oh, yeah. Well, in MSO, it's 50-50, almost exact split, male to female, which is really cool. We're all very happy about that. The boys are happy too. But yeah, the industry has been male, well, every industry has been male dominated for a long time, and we can talk endlessly about that. We can talk about the past and get very cross. We can talk about the future and get very political. But what we should do instead is just try and allow the space for both men and women to feel equally happy with calling themselves a composer. And so I think I've noticed that there are more women feeling confident enough to become composers and work in that manscape. And I think that's great. And I think also that men are generally not competitive of that space anyway. No. In Australia, there's hardly any sexism that I can see, any conscious sexism towards female composers as far as I can see. So it's up to the girls now to step up. Come on, nobody's stopping you. Let's go.
Right, that was my next question. Have you ever felt discriminated against being a woman in our profession?
Not even once, but it could be because I'm quite confident, I'm quite aggressive, to use a word with negative connotations. I have a few tendencies that are less feminine. So I guess all my friends were brass players when I was growing up, male brass players.
I think you're very feminine.
I can be, but I don't feel like I'm only that. And I think a lot of people should be exploring their other side of their gender anyway.
Exactly.
Boys, girls, it doesn't matter. I think we should all just be open to whatever emotions or feelings or identities that we have. And if women don't feel like it's part of their identity to be a composer, they should think about that a little bit more, because they can create the future. They can create our artistic future by stepping up and being a composer.
So are you saying it might be a limitation more that they're putting on themselves?
I think so,
rather than
yeah,
society is
especially
putting
in Australia where really nothing's stopping you. Nothing is stopping you.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, I would like to ask, where do you think the state of the arts will be in 20 years from now?
Oh, wow. What a question. Well,
You'll see more women in it?
I really hope so. I really, really hope so. But you never know what happens in the world of feminism. There could be a massive backlash of women wanting to stay home and only have children. You never know, and that's totally up to individuals what they want to do. But where I see the state of the arts is actually totally dependent upon the state of everything else. Because when we're doing our art, we have to feel safe and secure and supported. So it depends on how much political unrest there's going to be, depends on how many of our global resources are running out and all the problems that that's going to cause. So it's easy for us to be immersed in this, the state of the arts, but actually our world depends totally on what the wider world is doing. So let's just cross our fingers that we will be free to practice whatever we want to practice in the future.
So, have you noticed any trends in the composition?
Yeah, the composition has changed a lot over the past 10 years. The piece I'm playing for this documentary, Jane Hammond's That Wild Mercury Sound, that was probably only the second piece in 4 years, since 2007, that had a backing track. So a backing track used to be a really unusual thing for composers to be able to do and then to want to do. So her backing track is made up of all sorts of beautiful electronic sounds and a few little voice clips of a Bob Dylan concert. And so that was unique. But last year, 2015, every single piece that was submitted to me had a backing track, an electronic backing track.
Every single one?
Every single one. And so that was quite an interesting random change. Whether it's random or not, I'm not sure, but that's 5 composers who put a backing track down for me.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So going forward, can you imagine, say in 20 years from now, not only will they have a backing track, but maybe a computer will do the composing
Maybe
for
that
us?
little Yamaha robot will be standing up and playing that. So that's cool. I'll take a holiday.
Cool. So, Sarah, I'm really interested to know, we know that you're an extraordinarily busy woman and you put on these extremely ambitious shows and I just wanted you to run me through some of the tasks that you need to get through to get one of these shows up. Was there any one show that was particularly tough, or is it always hard? And what do you have to do?
It's not hard anymore because I know exactly what I need to do now, because it's nearly it's nearly 10 years old, the show. The first show was probably the most outrageous. I'd commissioned 5 pieces that I'd had those pieces sitting in my cupboard for about, 10, 12 years, and I couldn't play them because I didn't have the right instruments for it. I decided to put on this show. We had to build a stage. It was the Abbotsford Convent. We had to hire a stage and build it. And we
You were
had
literally
to do,
on your knees building this stage.
Oh, well, Paul, my now husband, was building the stage with me, for me. I had cameras. There used to be a company called The Music Page who did live streaming. They recorded and filmed for me. A is for Atlas, the production company, filmed as well. I had a strong sense that everything needed to be archived. This was the first show, okay? So I knew what I wanted, sort of. I'd never done anything like it before. I had an MC, John Arcaro, the timpanist percussionist from MSO. He was the MC. I didn't know if an MC was the right thing to do, but anyway, there I was. He was there MCing and interviewing the composers. This is something I'll never do again. It makes the concert twice as long. And really, if the composer can't say what they want through their music,
Leave
let's not interview them, you know. But oh, bless them all, they were beautiful. I got a costume made from a guy I'd met on the street who was busking. He was playing cello. He was wearing a top hat and Edwardian clothes. He said, I make clothes. I design my own clothes. I said, oh, make me a costume. He made it for me a week before the show. It was a full-length Napoleonic dress coat, and I couldn't move my arms this way. So I had to decide what to do. So I put the easiest piece first and played it because I didn't need to open my arm at all. It was all here. And then I took it off and I had this other thing underneath, which was also made by a different Australian. So I had to take the coat off and then I could actually move my arms after that. So, oh my goodness. So that sort of thing, that sort of unanticipated drama comes into every show all the time. Yeah. And that show really nearly killed me. I had people sketching the show. They're called two men drawing. They sit in a corner and they each draw their own perspective of the same scene. One's an architect and one's a graphic designer. And the architect's drawings are really meticulous and the graphic designer's all free. And then they pair their drawings together and we show them at the concerts. There were so many levels to the show and still continue to be so many levels that those kinds of dramas are the ones that keep me really busy. The notes, the playing is the least of it.
Right. Marketing?
You have to be really careful what you spend money on marketing. I once hired a publicist, a rock and roll publicist, because I thought my show would speak more to the people outside of the classical world. She said, oh, wonderful, I've always wanted to work with a classical musician. And I was like, no, I don't mean that. I want you to get your network interested in what I'm doing. It's got electric violins and semi-acoustic. And the show, walked on stage. I paid her quite a lot of money. I walked on stage and I recognised every single person in the audience. They were all my crowd. So that was a lot of money for absolutely no benefit whatsoever. So you learn really the hard way. Paying for advertising, it's not going to work unless you've already got a profile.
Wait, what kind of advertising?
Oh, like you can pay for radio ads, which is okay if people already know that the show's on. Oh, yeah, that's right, I'm going to go to that show already. Unless you're, you know, Madonna or someone famous already, be really careful what you spend your money on. This is my advice. You have to personally ask people to come and support you in what you're doing and take the time and trouble to explain why you're doing it, what it's going to be like, because it's an unknown. My show is an unknown. You'll walk in, you don't know what the music's going to be. You don't know who the composers are.
Okay, so photographers, flyers, that kind of thing?
The archive is really important for the composers mainly, so they can have a recording and a video. I've got a website which is like an archive database. Every picture of every composer, every collaborative artist that I've ever worked with, some of their work. It's like a database. It's fantastic. You can't comment on the website. It's not interactive at all. It's just to see what the show has been all about. For me, that's really important to keep me going as well. If I look at my website, I just think, how did anyone do that? You know, so that's good to keep the self-esteem up, because after a while it does get really draining and really grueling, and you ask why you're doing it. You're not getting recognition because you're not commissioning really famous people. Right. You're just grinding away at it because you believe in it. So
you've got to delegate well, that's what you're saying.
You've got to do the extra step to get people to come. It's up to you and your personal connections with people, and that takes the most time and effort. But it's worth it because then people are there and they're supporting you.
And ticketing, do you use that?
Sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. It depends on the venue. The TOF in town is a really great venue because they have their own ticketing system. Oh, and they don't charge you anything. They just take a percentage of the door. Right. So the incentive is then to get as many people as possible, so you can get all that money and the TOF gets all that money. So the TOF is a great venue. Like, there are other venues like that. I think Paris Cat's like that. Oh, I'm not sure. But places like Recital Centre or Deakin Edge, they're very expensive because they're big venues. They've got full-time technical staff. They need that money to keep themselves going, but they're not that friendly financially towards little people like me. So I like to find different venues anyway because I'm amplified anyway. So
communication through text message, email,
Yeah.
or social
Talking
media?
and flyers. I'll pay money for flyers. Yeah.
Flyers,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you use
Not too many though. You don't just leave a pile somewhere. You hand them personally to people.
Yeah, but to be clear, like I'm just wondering, do you do all three of those communication styles? Do you do
Yeah.
text messages,
Yeah.
emails, and social media?
Yeah, and sometimes letters, like writing actual letters to people. People from a different generation appreciate a letter instead of...
Snail mail,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it still exists.
Okay. I haven't used it for years.
See, I'm a different generation from
I
you.
see.
I like snail mail.
Right, okay. So, you're a Curro, and this to me means that you were probably exposed to music when you were very little.
Yeah, definitely. So little I can barely remember it. But two things really spring to mind. My mum and dad used to be part of a rotation of people who had soirees at their house, you know, the little family concerts. They were called Sue's Do's, and once a month they would be at a different household. And the most incredible things used to happen at Sue's Do's. I remember seeing, I must have been 7 or 8, and I looked up and there was something that looked like a cello but wasn't a cello or a bass. What was it? It's a viola da gamba. So in those days, the early music revolution hadn't quite taken off in the mainstream as it has now. So I was amazed at these instruments. And then there was this man who used to come in and sing, and he had a voice like a woman. Of course, now I know that's a countertenor, but he was this extraordinary man. He was really skinny and he dressed beautifully and he had this moustache like this. And he sang it like a soprano, and I was mesmerised. I used to sit up the front listening to him. So all these incredible things used to happen in my own home. It was wonderful. Besides that, my father, who's John Curro, he started the Queensland Youth Orchestra. They're having their 50th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Mum used to drag me to every single concert as soon as I was old enough to walk. And being exposed to that 4 times a year as a child, this epic symphonic music, before I even picked up an instrument. Yeah. And finally, my sister, who's 7 years older than me, played the violin, so I just wanted to copy her.
Ah, yeah, there's the sister
thing.
kind of competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Which goes on today, right?
She thinks it goes on, but I'm not
You're
competitive.
fine. Okay, good. So, can you talk about just a few significant milestones in your time going through high school and maybe into your student days that led you into your early time as a profession, in the profession? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I always knew I wanted to be in a symphony orchestra. I didn't have that much desire to be a soloist, even though that's the way we're taught, as you know. Yeah. We're taught to be soloists, but on the weekend you go to Queensland Youth Orchestra and you hang out with your friends and you play amazing music as a teenager. So all through my young life and my teens, I was really gearing myself up for a world of the symphony orchestra. And I've ended up there. I'm in the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and I absolutely love it. But what happened to me also in Queensland Youth Orchestra was Dad commissions composers. So he commissions new works all the time for performance with his orchestra. And there was one piece by Peter Rankin. I can't remember the title of it. I was about 14 years old. It was really, really hard. It wasn't tonal at all. It was atonal, very weird, and had these techniques in it that I'd never experienced before. Aleatoric windows, which is where you're given a bit of material and you have to do it in your own way and everyone's doing it differently. All this stuff to me was quite amazing and I loved it. It was harder than anything I'd ever played, but I worked really hard at playing it. It was very rewarding playing this weird music well. So from right back then, I was fascinated by living people who could create things. So I guess that's where the seed of me wanting to commission composers came from.
So when did you start commissioning composers?
When I actually started commissioning on my own, well, I had a friend called Anton Kosh who was playing the trumpet in Queensland Youth Orchestra, and he wrote music as well, and he wrote in a really movie style. His music sounded like, I don't know, John Williams, Danny Elfman. He's a real traditional composer, and I asked him to write me a piece. And of course he wrote me a piece and he didn't charge me for it, which was so beautiful, but we were such good friends, so that was fine. Yeah, so that was the first piece I commissioned.
Wow. Did you perform it when you do get a new commission? Do you perform it straight away? Or?
Well, then I couldn't, because I couldn't reconcile playing really ultra new music on my old instrument. So my old instrument is very old. It's an instrument Dad gave me. It just didn't feel right. I don't want to be too esoteric about it, but I commissioned a few other pieces after Anton's piece. I probably had 5 altogether, and I just never felt like putting on a concert. I commissioned for violin and percussion first to break the mould of the violin piano 19th century ideal. But still, I just didn't feel like it matched. I mean, a vibraphone is a 21st century instrument. Xylophones, drums, they're all 21st century instruments. And I just felt awkward about playing new music on an old instrument. So it wasn't actually until I'd found the right instrument that I could then perform.
So what was the turning point?
Well, the turning point, I happen to have the turning point here. It's when I walked into Melbourne violin maker Paul Davies' shop, studio at the Abbotsford Convent, and I saw 5 of these hanging on the wall, just like that. And they were all differently coloured and antiqued, and I saw that. I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but I saw that, and I knew that was the future of what I was trying to do. I knew that this would sound like a violin, but I also knew that it could come into the 20th and 21st century because I could amplify it. So this is the answer to what I wanted to do. And as soon as I saw this, I grabbed this and I plugged it in, and I got my music out that I'd been hoarding for 20 years, and I tried it all on this, and that's when the volume show was born.
Right. So when you say, you bring it into the 20th and 21st century, do you see this as an exclusive way of going forward, like the electrical instrument?
No, because some composers write in an old-fashioned style. For example, they might write in a style of Hindemith or Bartók or Isai. So they choose a traditional acoustic violin to write for. So I'll get my modern traditional acoustic violin out and play their music on that. And then I show all my composers this, or whichever one I have, the electric and a traditional acoustic, and depending on their style, they'll write according to how they feel what's best for their music to come out.
And you play it for them too, right? And I mean, I just heard it for the first time myself, and I was really taken aback. It was different to what I've heard electric violins before. It wasn't like an electric violin.
Yeah.
It had a very singing, beautiful sound. It sounded like when you put the reverb on, like it was in a church.
Yeah.
And I imagine that must stimulate a lot of composers' imagination. Like,
that's right.
If they hadn't been exposed to it before, then maybe a whole new world would open up for them.
I think a whole new world has opened up for many of my composers. I think it's beautiful, and this is the answer for me. I'm not judgmental of other people who don't do it, but again, I'm lucky. I'm associated with the person who can let me use these instruments.
When I approached Sarah after one of her concerts, all I needed to say to her was, "I'm a composer." And she instantly said, "Write me a piece." She didn't know anything about me. She didn't know what kind of music I wrote, what style, how experienced I was, but she just said, "Write me a piece." And I was floored because, I was so excited because it was my first major commission. But also, more broadly, it represented something really special about her and what she's doing for contemporary arts culture in Australia. And that is being open and generous and really driving towards fueling that culture, making composers feel comfortable and feel like they can contribute work and that she can facilitate that. I'm personally so thankful to her. And I'm so excited to see what else she's going to come up with.
Andy, thank you so much for this piece.
Cheers.
I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. Oh my goodness. Now, why Harpy?
Well,
You know what a harpy
Yeah,
is, right?
I know what a harpy is. Yeah, well, when I came along to a concert of yours, a volume concert, a couple of years ago, and saw you in your element and saw you in action, and I thought, oh gosh, it would be great to write her a piece, and I really wanted something. I wanted to write the piece about something that was sort of feminine, but also a bit manic, a bit crazy.
Yep.
Because I got this, I don't know, I got all sorts of vibes from you while you were on stage, and I hope that I could do that justice.
Because the
this,
title, it's harpy,
Yes.
that which snatches.
Yeah, so a harpy is a mythological beast, half woman, half bird, and she's crazy. But the word itself, I looked this up later, it actually means that which snatches, so something which snatches, so snatches mortals
Because didn't
away.
she fly down
That's
across
right,
the
she'd fly
banquet
down
table and
and
snatch the food out of...
That's right, she'd snatch the food away, and
Right.
she'd snatch even people away and take them and
Yeah,
maybe
right.
devour them, I'm not sure.
Probably.
But yeah, it means that something that snatches, and so I translated that quite literally
Oh, you
into
certainly-
the playing technique
You
in this
certainly
piece.
did. Well,
Yeah.
let's see how it kind of goes. It's so much fun to play. So I'm just pretty clean on this channel here.
Yeah,
So thank you for writing it for the semi-acoustic.
absolute
Because
pleasure.
it's my favourite
Great instrument.
instrument to play. So we'll just start off a bit clean. So here's the opening. What do you reckon? Bit more reverb?
Yeah, you know, I like my atmosphere.
Yeah, bring back the 70s.
Yeah.
Bit more reverb. We'll crank it up. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. Now that there's reverb, I could probably take a bit more time,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think so. I
Just
think
let things...
yeah.
So it doesn't have to be perfectly
Nah,
rhythmic or anything.
Particularly this opening section can be really spacey.
Yeah,
for sure.
okay. All right, I'll just go from the pits. That makes it sound a bit more scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Anticipation.
then there's that bit again. Okay, here comes some birdie things. All right. Is that kind of... Oh,
Yeah.
it says 10 seconds.
Yeah, quite a while. Quite
So
a while.
longer than I probably-
Indulge it, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And more sort of uneven, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like the slow ones, but you can actually go a little bit faster with some of them.
With
if you
some,
like.
okay.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
let's try that. Kind of like that? Yeah? Okay, cool. And then a pause.
Then a
How long
pause.
do you reckon that should...
I think it's one of those pauses that composers put in music where they really just want you to feel feel it in the time, feel the room, feel the space.
Yeah,
so
cool.
it can be different every time.
All right,
yeah.
excellent.
I
All
don't
right.
want you to count through it. Don't want you to be. It
Okay,
needs
I
to be
promise.
organic.
I know, that's too classical, isn't it? Okay, more free. Okay, and here's this theme again. Hang on. Oh, that's different this time. All right. That's self-explanatory. Molto sul pon.
Yeah.
To normal.
Yeah.
Mystery pause.
Mystery pause.
That's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Composers do that a
I know.
lot.
That's
Sul
probably
pon,
one of those
sul
things-
tasto, sul pon, sul tasto.
It's. I mean, because I play violin as well
Oh, okay.
myself. Yeah.
All right,
So
And there's no excuse for
there's no, but that's one of those things that I think I compose quite a bit of this on my own instrument. Certain things, though, I sort of had to imagine because it extends beyond my technical capacity.
So you played through this to make sure it was possible,
Yeah,
right?
well, in fact, I
that's
invented a
good.
lot of it on the violin
Oh,
itself,
great.
which is nice because I also play piano, and a lot of my compositions start at the piano.
At the piano.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
Is this the first piece for violin that you've written?
it's not. I have written for solo violin before, but this was definitely a sort of, because this was the first piece that I wasn't writing for myself.
Ah, so
And
it's harder.
It's exactly, it's harder.
Thanks. Okay.
And I really felt like I wanted a piece that would be quite virtuosic.
Yeah.
And because
It's definitely that.
you know.
This bit at the end, oh my goodness. Okay,
Right,
we'll get
right.
there, I suppose. I found this bit at the end really hard. Okay, we'll get to it. I'm not going to complain, I promise. I
Okay.
complain too much before I've practiced things. My composers get so annoyed with me. They're just try it.
I'm not annoyed
Just
at all.
try it. Okay. So there were a couple of things I wanted to ask you actually.
Sure.
So when we get to this new section, we've
Hmm.
just come to this, it says vacant free.
Hmm.
So that's good. Sul Pont's great for that. And then we get to this bit, which I really felt could have some, I don't know, distortion or something like that.
Definitely.
Can we try a
that?
few sounds
Yeah.
for that? Okay,
Yes.
let's see. We'll put it on the filthy channel and just check out a few. There we go. That's something. That's not too bad. Okay, oh, there's a bit of a hum there. Hang on. I'll try 11 like I... Okay. Is that too much, do you reckon?
No,
I guess in a
it could
big
almost go
space
more
that would
crunchy.
be... Okay, more crunchy. Let's
Yeah.
see. Trouble is, these
Yeah.
amps they're for guitars, basically.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
a perfect violin amp hasn't been invented yet. But let's just put a little bit of that on. Okay. So,
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's quite a lot of
extra sounds
stuff
in
there.
there.
Yeah.
but that's all right.
It's a nice colour.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's just go back to the clean and see if we can just crank up the reverb.
Crank up the.
Let's see what that does. Well, it's so fast moving now. Maybe we don't need
Less of it.
a bit less,
yeah,
and
good
maybe
point.
we should just try a bit of a dirty channel. That's a bit of reverb.
Yeah.
What do you think
No,
about that
I think
sort of
that's,
sound?
I think that's smarter to go a bit less when
Yeah.
it is moving faster.
And when we're in the
Yeah.
proper venue, we can, with the amazing Miracle sound guys, they can get
Totally.
a beautiful, crazy, harpy sound for us.
Totally.
Okay, so then we've got. So going from pont, do you want that to be on the bridge as well? The
Pretty
pont?
close. Yeah.
So all of those fast-moving notes.
Yeah. A little bit gypsy violin.
Gypsy.
a
So
little bit. A little bit.
Aronovitz.
Yeah.
Where's that? Where are you from?
That's a Polish name.
Polish.
Maybe it's Polish Jewish, or maybe a little bit of klezmer there.
Okay,
maybe, yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Buried
I don't know.
there in the DNA.
Buried there, yeah.
Okay, cool.
But something a bit grungy.
Yeah,
Sure.
okay,
Yeah.
so that's fine. I can do that. So left-hand pits, yeah.
Yep.
Hang on. Pits, arco, and... You know what? I reckon we can turn that down too.
That's a better sound, yeah.
This
Yeah.
is a bar top.
That's a
pits,
bar top
like,
pits, yeah.
like
so you
that.
have to literally like grab the
two.
string away and let it slap. Yeah.
Because I'm a classical musician by day,
Yes.
it bothers me that I need more time to get
Yeah,
that pits. Is
right.
it okay if I just take the time to get the pits?
Definitely.
Because the effect is really important. So that doesn't matter if it's not perfect.
No.
Right?
I mean, there's so much happening in that bar anyway.
Yeah.
It's going to feel energetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So. That. Oh, and just to backtrack.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm really going for that pits, I accidentally get the D string.
It's all right.
Is that okay?
It's okay. It's part of the atmosphere.
Maybe we could just write. Am I allowed to just write it in?
Yeah.
If you do another revision,
Yeah,
just put it in because
definitely.
it's easier to get it.
Yeah.
Then you can just smash it,
Yeah.
and you don't have to worry about which string you're getting.
Definitely.
That feels much better for me to do. That's good.
and it makes sense. I mean, there's a D in that chord anyway.
What I loved here, oh my goodness, was your chord progressions. Now, I've done a Bachelor of Music, but I can't analyse this section anymore.
Don't ask me to analyse it either.
I bet you could. Come on. So is the normal this theme, and then. I love
getting
that.
some crazy
Listen to
sounds
that.
in there. Listen to that.
That's because I'm playing
Yeah.
in tune.
You're getting the harmonics, yeah.
And then it just does this harpy thing again. You don't care about like noise.
No. In fact, you could hold on to that chord a little
Longer?
longer, before screeching down. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
cool. That's great. All right. Well, and then there's just this final thing that I wanted to talk about.
Yep.
How slow does this last bit? This is really summing up your Eastern European background, I think. We've got this thing that starts slow
Definitely.
and then gets faster.
Yep.
And what I found the hardest was actually the dynamics.
Yeah, no, definitely. But they do make it.
I have to really overdo them because this can be quite loud.
Yeah.
And so with all these notes don't really matter.
Yeah.
Do
I
that,
don't
like
care
the
where you
snatching.
get to, but it's all about the snatching.
Okay,
Coming
all
back
about
to
the
that
snatching.
title. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Sarah. No, pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.